We all know the story of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. After he's crucified, he's put into a tomb, and 3 days later, he rises. And those stories that we know come from the four Gospels. But is there any physical piece of evidence that could also lead to the fact that this is true? I'm Brian Katonic, and I'm about to tell you about an ancient artifact that gives credence to the fact that this event truly happened. This article is an amazing thing. It combines history and mystery, intrigue, science and religion. It's one of the most fascinating things I've ever heard about. It's called the Shroud of Turin. So what exactly is the Shroud of Turin? So 2,000 years ago, a practice of the Jewish faith to bury someone wasn't putting them in a coffin. You got a burial cloth called a shroud, and you wrapped the person in it. You didn't bind them up like a mummy like in Egyptian time, but you wrapped it over the body. So this shroud is the burial cloth of Jesus. Why is it known as the Shroud of Turin? Well, since the 1400s, the cloth has been kept in a cathedral in Turin, Italy. Thus the name Shroud of Turin. Okay, let's go back 2,000 years ago. Pontius Pilate orders that Jesus be crucified. He is flogged by Roman soldiers, then taken up with his cross to Calvary and nailed to the cross, where he then dies. What happens to his body then?
After his death, Joseph of Arimathea, a Jew but secret follower of Jesus, went to Pilate and asked if he could have the body. Pilate agreed. Joseph then bought a large piece of burial cloth, had the body prepared, and wrapped it in the burial shroud, consistent with Jewish tradition. The Bible has scripture about this very fact. From Mark 15:46. So Joseph bought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in linen, and placed it in a tomb cut out of rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb.
After being placed in the tomb, 3 days later on Easter Sunday, Mary Magdalene comes down and finds the tomb's open. He goes and gets the disciples. They rush to the tomb. They don't find the body, but they find the cloth.
From John 20, verse 4 through 8. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there. Descriptions of the burial shroud being in the tomb is related in all four Gospels.
As you could imagine, this burial cloth was a very big deal to Jesus' followers. It wasn't just because that it last held his body, but because once they looked at it, they were amazed what was on it. You want to see? Let's check it out.
Here is the Shroud of Turin. As you see, it contains an image of a man that has been crucified, that shows the same injuries that Christ did. What makes it amazing? No one knows how this image has appeared on the cloth. There's no paints, pigments, inks, stains of any kind. It's never been able to be recreated. Just think about being an early follower of Jesus and seeing this cloth for the first time. You would believe that the only way it came about was due to something supernatural. Now, to get a better perspective, I'm going to show you images of certain areas of the cloth so you can see what it contains and the injuries that you can see on the man. Look at the close-up of the head. It has marks on the top of it, such as it has been pierced by something like a crown of thorns. Next, here's an image of the hands. See the large blotchy item? That is where a nail went through the hands. Also, in looking at the feet also has a mark that is symbolic of a nail going through the feet. Additionally, the image shows whip marks and an oval shape that would be consistent with a lance going through the body. All of these are consistent with the injuries that are described to Jesus from the Gospels. After his death, we're not exactly sure where the shroud was for a period of time. There are fragments of literature describing a cloth with a man's image on it at various places around Europe over the next 1300 years. At one point, it's believed that it was in Constantinople and that the Knights Templar actually attacked the city for the sole purpose of getting the shroud back. We do know precisely where the shroud has been since 1354. At that time, a French knight named Geoffroy de Charnay presented it to a French church. It remained there for about 100 years. In 1453, it was purchased by a royal family in Italy and was eventually moved to a church in Turin, where it is today.
Once the shroud got to Turin, it became a bit of a tourist attraction. Pilgrims would come from all over Europe to come see the shroud. Now, let me tell you, it's a big production to get the shroud out. So it's 3 feet long and 13 feet wide. It would take 6 bishops to hold it up so people could view it. So this continued into the late 1800s. At that time, the church decided the shroud was getting some wear and tear due to the handling and industrial pollution. So they decided to keep the shroud encased most of the time, but they still wanted a way for people to view it. Well, the new art form of photography was out, so they got a local photographer named Segunda Pia to come take pictures of it. So if you're young and don't know this, photographs aren't like they are on our iPhones today. You used to take a picture, then take the film and make a negative. Then from the negative, you print a positive picture. So Segunda went in there, created the negative, looked at it, and he almost dropped it. Because he saw something that no one had ever seen at that time, and quite honestly, no photograph had ever produced this since. What was it? Well, let's see.
The negative shows the shroud in a way that shouldn't seem possible. So as you see here, the negative actually shows a positive image of a man. And on top of that, shows extensive detail that does not appear on the cloth. This is something that was yet to be explained, but does appear. While Pia was originally lauded for his photographs, critics later came forward and said that they had to be some sort of forgery, because this was not possible to show up on a photograph this way. This debate continued for several more decades, until the 30s, when more photographs were authorized by the church, and the same image appeared on these negatives as well.
Scientific interest continued in the shroud, and more scientists wanted to study it. In 1978, the church allowed 33 scientists from the United States to come over, and they gave them 120 hours to study the shroud. These scientists, most of whom were from national labs such as Los Alamos, came over and did an in-depth study on it. What were their findings? Well, it was pretty interesting.
Here's the text from their conclusion page. And without reading the whole thing, it states there's no paint, dyes, incense, spices, oils, or anything that could have created this image. Also, they noted that there was real blood on the fabric and that the image is actually in 3D. This is the final conclusion from their study. Thus, the answer to the question of how the image was produced or what produced the image remains now, as it has been in the past, a mystery.
In 1998, the church allowed for a group to do carbon-14 dating to determine exactly what the age of the shroud is. So what they did, they took a 3-inch corner off the top, cut it into thirds, and sent to 3 different labs to see how old the shroud truly was. The results? 700 years old. So that's the end of the story, right? Well, not exactly. See, after the report came out, other scientists looked at how they took the cloth off. And they said, this portion of the cloth could have easily been contaminated. See, the shrouds throughout history have been handled hundreds and hundreds of times. It actually had been involved in fires, been doused with water, and at one point even molten silver was dripped onto it. They said this piece could have easily been deteriorated and contaminated, and therefore those results could be incorrect. Well, this debate raged back and forth for some times, and no one could come to a definitive answer. It seemed like only a miracle of God could intercede to help answer the question. And a miracle came.
Meet Sue Benifer, an American nurse who, while a Christian, wasn't that active in her faith. However, she began receiving visions from Jesus, who told her that she was going to help him prove his resurrection. One day, Jesus told her to watch TV. She turned it on, began flipping through the channels, and saw a documentary on the Shroud of Turin and the carbon-14 dating. While watching this and seeing the samples they used, Jesus again told her, "That sample is not part of my cloth." Pam did not understand why Jesus chose her for this work, but she went ahead. She took pictures of the sample and sent to 3 different experts around the world, asking them if this piece of cloth was all continuous. The experts did not know what they were looking at, but each came back with the same answer, that the cloth in question had been altered and was not all part of the original fabric. That is, at some point, fabric had been stitched into this cloth. Using this research material, Pam, along with another friend, wrote a research paper that she was allowed to present to a scientific conference and then was included in a scientific journal. Other scientists, after Pam's paper came out, looked at those portions that had been used for carbon-14 dating. They all concluded that she was correct. Apparently, due to years of handling the shroud, the corners had become fragmented. At some point, new stitching and cloth was put on that did not match the rest of the linen. Therefore, the portions that were tested in the carbon-14 dating were not consistent with the rest of the shroud.
What got me interested in the shroud is in 2024. There's a new way of dating artifacts called wide-angle X-ray scattering. It's a way of dating things without hurting the artifact itself. So this dating was done, and the results were amazing. 1, the linen cloth is at least 2,000 years of age. 2, it contains pollen on it that is unique for the area of Jerusalem. 3, it actually contains dirt that is unique to the grottos of Jerusalem. Hey, that's where he's crucified, right? So pretty good indication that this is the burial shroud of Jesus Christ. So what's the final answer here? There are still people for and against that this shroud is authentic. So whether you're on one side or another, here are 2 things that are agreed to. 1, we know the shroud has been untouched and unaltered since 1350. 2, no one's been able to recreate the image on the shroud, and we know it contains no inks, dyes, paints, stains, or anything else. So with this in mind, we are left with one of 2 possibilities. Number 1, sometime before 1350, a forger got a piece of cloth that was from Jerusalem around the time Christ died. That cloth had pollen on it from Jerusalem. And they created an image and used a way that no one's been able to recreate since that time. Additionally, this person knew that sometime in the next 600 years, photography would be invented. So he created a negative positive image that no one could see at that time. In fact, he couldn't even see it because photography wasn't around. So that's choice 1. Number 2, that the shroud is 2,000 years old. That it was created by some supernatural means. Mind you this, there are hundreds of burial shrouds they have in museums around the world from that same time period. Not a one has any image on it at all. So, look at those 2 possibilities. When one is totally discounted, it only leaves you with the conclusion that number 2 is correct. The Shroud of Turin is the burial cloth of Jesus. It was created by a supernatural event, such as being resurrected. It's an important thing. It's going to continue to be an important thing. And I hope this helps your faith that for proof that the resurrection occurred, you don't just have to look at the 4 Gospels. You can actually look at a physical artifact. Hope you have a wonderful Easter, and God bless.